I'm back, and it's fresh off Ninja Turtles month, and this has given me the idea of to do things a certain way. Instead of Monday and Friday videos, I'm changing things up a little bit. I'm going to be doing, one month is going to be strictly for anime videos. The next month will be strictly movie, TV show, and etc. live action stuff videos. So that's what I'm going to do, and that's how I'm going to change my channel up to keep it, well, fresh and relevant. Anyhow, here it is. This is my first Versus video in a long time that I've done, and why not do it with two games that mean the fucking world to me. Final Fantasy VII versus Final Fantasy VIII. And no, I am not going to talk about the remake. I don't give two shits about the remake at all. But I am going to talk about 7 and 8. I'm going to talk about the stories, the characters, the villains, and my final thoughts among the entire series. So let's get things started, and let's start listing or versing this shit. Let's hit it. The Final Fantasy games 7 and 8 versus each other. And also, one quick add-on, I am not going to judge graphics because 8's graphics would automatically be an unfair advantage. So let's hit it. Let's start out with the story. Uniquely different within both. I mean, these are entirely different stories. They start out with two characters are basically just going throughout events of their life. Mostly like every Final Fantasy story, the main character's point of view is the big one. Now let's start with 7. It starts out with ex-soldier, from what he says, Cloud Strife. And he is going amongst through the entire run of the game trying to stop Shinra. And of course, evidently leading on to Sephiroth, the final battle with Sephiroth, who is a major player in Cloud's past. This story is honestly very straightforward. I mean, it does have its moments of, okay, that's definitely jumping the shark. But other than that, it is telling you exactly what you need to know and what you need to see beforehand. I mean, it is just paved the way, basically. It is easily one of the best video game stories I have ever seen. And it's Cloud's, since it's told directly from his point of view, most of the time, at least 80% of the time, you get to see a lot of enjoyment out of this. His interaction with the other characters are fantastic, and honestly, I don't know. I just really love this one to pieces. I mean, in my opinion, it's definitely a classic and very straightforward. This story paved the way for Final Fantasy in general, and it made Final Fantasy look at games completely overhauling them differently than, say, 6's where there are too many characters. This one revolutionized the entire gaming franchise, and I can see why. It is an excellent fucking game with so much going on in the story. There's a lot of emotion here, and there's scenes that will make anyone, almost anyone with a heart, cry. Some of the scenes in here are just devastatingly, heartbreakingly awful to watch, and it just breaks your heart the more you see it. And the more it goes on, it could always be a lie. Basically, Cloud is an unreliable narrator. He is telling us his story, and he basically bullshits his way through it through most of the run. The only thing is, he doesn't realize he's an unreliable narrator until midway into the game. But this just, it revolutionized storytelling in video games. Video games beforehand, especially early games, was rescue the princess because I got to, or go to Ganon and fight him because he's evil. They didn't really give much motive to the villain other than he's an asshole dinosaur kidnapper bitchhead, and that's about it. With 7, they really amped it up, and they put so much writing and effort into the story and the script. And I've got to say, it's just a blast and all. I mean, every time I play this game, I am so invested in the story that I honestly just don't care about some of the shortcomings of the game itself. The story is so wonderful, and this is one of the few times where the story outranks the gameplay. But I'm comparing stories and not gameplay in this segment, so let's jump over to Final Fantasy VIII in a moment. After I'm done, here are some of my critiques with 7's story. There are moments, especially after Disc 1, but mainly in Disc 1, where it feels like the story is stopping. It goes to an absolute halt, and this happens after they escape Shinra headquarters, and they're just looking for Sephiroth after Sephiroth kills a lot of the guards, and he just walks out, and you find out that he's looking for something, and then we spend a big hour and a half to 2 hours looking for him, going from boats and all that shit, asking questions. Hey, have you seen Sephiroth? Yeah, I seen him walk that way. That's where the story takes a big halt here, and God, is it bad. It can get really pretentious at times. But that is mainly the shortcomings I have with it. Right after those moments, it picks up and you get really hooked into it. There are some moments in the story that I do find questionable, like the whole thing with Cloud's identity and etc. If Tifa was there, how come she wasn't able to tell Cloud that, oh wait, that wasn't you, that was Zack, moron? But more on that later. I mean, there are some really big plot holes in this story and etc. And I would be remiss if I said this was a perfect video game, which it damn near is, but it does have its faults. And I've got to say, let's move on to Final Fantasy VIII story as I judge it. The Final Fantasy VIII story is told from Squall's point of view while he is working, technically not working, but he is in an academy called Seed. And this time he just runs across a lot of people, and they make friends off and on. He gets a really strong connection to a character that he is hired to protect named Riona. And a big love triangle happens within this story between him and Cypher, his rival of this game. This one is told more of the classic archetype of, well, it's Squall's story and we're going to stick to it. And honestly, there are moments where you really question some of the story methods here. I've got to say, there are some moments where the story just doesn't make sense. But most of that would be within Disc 3 and 4's issues that I have with the game. Some of it seems really dragged out, especially the time travel stuff, and the Laguna flashbacks can be really fucking tedious here. But other than that, I love the story to this game too, and it can be interesting. Is it as flawless as 7's story is built up to be? Well, no. It suffers a lot of flaws too. You're basically going from Seed Academy, and they're trying to do this whole war thing going on, which is cool and all, and I do understand it, but there's a lot of times where it's like, well, what the fuck? Why would you make that decision? Why are you doing this? Just why? And that has to do with, well, just sometimes I've got to say bad writing. This one, instead of being a straight out action game with the story and stopping and trying to save the planet, this one is more of a love story, which I'm kind of a sucker for. I do really like the story in this and the relationship between characters, which I'm not getting into characters just yet. Anyhow, let's continue on with here. There are some major pros and cons here. More cons than there are pros. In fact, if it wasn't for Spoonie's review of Final Fantasy VIII, I would have constantly said, Final Fantasy VIII is the best game, and I would have looked like a fucking moron. But still, I'm not revealing which one I like more just yet. There is a lot going on, and there are 4 discs, which is completely different than 7's length in story. Now, when it comes to the length in the games, good lord, and there's some really bad fuck-ups here too, and some of the character dialogue and etc. going on. I mean, sometimes you just want to fucking smack some of these characters in the face, but does that make the story bad? Does it hinder it? Well, a little bit. There's the villain motivation that I have the biggest issue with here. They don't explain why on the villain's motives very well, unless you look at some theories that are really well put together. And honestly, I kind of like the theories, but I'll get into those in a moment. However, I've got to say, the story can drag, especially at the worst part is they start dragging at the beginning of the game. To me, the story doesn't start picking up until you are about in the middle or near the end of Disc 1, when you are trying to stop the sorceress Edea herself from doing whatever the hell she's doing. It goes from a thing of trying to stop the president to the president being killed, which is when the fucking story actually picks up, to finally being somewhat interesting. At the beginning, yeah, it takes forever to get good. Unlike 7's, which throws you into the story and the action, kind of like Star Wars, right away. Right away, 7 just throws you in. However, 8, it tries to rely on its world building, and it doesn't do so well on its world building. Let's move on to the characters, but what am I going to say about this? Well, join me here to see who the winner is on the story. Now that we're here for the winners portion, I've got to say, comparing these two against each other are like apples and oranges. They're 2 completely different games, but 8's story is a lot slower and much more reserved than 7. 7 throws you right in, and it doesn't really get into the world building until you're in about the middle of Disc 1, which isn't a bad thing, but surprise, surprise, I'm going to say 8 does a better job with its story. It does a so much better job building up the story and the world around the characters that we get moments to breathe and check out the scenery. However, 7, it just throws you in with train heists and trying to destroy reactors and everything going on. It doesn't give you a minute to catch up on the world around you. Instead, you're in this gritty, disgusting world, and honestly, that's about it. So, in this round, just by a few minor points, sometimes being slow can be a good thing. It sounded like I was going to say 7 was the better game when it comes to story, but no, I'm going to say 8 is. 8 actually just brings in more to it, and it lets you get adjusted into this world a lot slower. And I like that. So, the winner on this round for the story mode has to go to 8. Believe it or not. And I am a huge 7 fan, so don't say I'm not a fan of 7. I love 7 to pieces, but 8's story building, it does it in a slow way, but it does it to where it feels like it's going to hook you in. And when it gets to the good highs of the story, it gets really fucking good. Now let's move on to the characters. I'm going to break the characters up into 2, well, technically 4 segments if you think about it. Anyhow, let's start out by looking at the characters of Final Fantasy VII. What can I say about this? There's going to be the good guy characters and then the villains. The good guy characters are all very memorable in 7. Oh my god, I just love these guys. They're fantastic. They all work well off each other. But, and this is a small, very small but, like a anorexic person's butt, the bonus characters, Vincent and Yuffie, they just feel kind of there. Their dialogue scenes, though incredible to use in the battlefield, feel like they're just tacked on, which can be a pain in the ass at times, or kind of keep story flow from going. But however, these guys all work well off each other. Cloud and Barrett, Tifa, Aerith, you name it, they all just have great chemistry. And they all work really well as a team. I like Barrett and Cloud's ego trips. Like, Cloud likes to play the cool, confident guy who thinks he's a badass first-class soldier, while, say, Barrett likes to play the leader of Team Avalanche who's trying to save the planet and being a big, badass motherfucker. It's great to watch their ego struggle and go up against each other, and it is just hilarious. At times, some of the dialogue can be really great. Also, I really like Aerith, Tifa, and Cloud's little, I guess it's a love triangle. They never state it, but Cloud cares a lot for Aerith, and I think that secretly he is in love with her, but he kind of keeps Tifa as his silver medal, his consolation prize. I don't know. That's how I've always viewed it. But I do like that Tifa and Aerith get along perfectly. And I really like Aerith's characteristic alone. In Advent Children, they kind of change her character up to be this angel or angelic character. But no, she's a cool girl who threatens to rip off a dude's balls. How badass do you need to be? And honestly, the other characters are great too. There isn't one annoying character in the main cast. I like them all. Sid is funny too. Sid is one of the funniest people ever. "Sit down and drink your damn tea" is one of the most memorable lines in the whole game. And I've got to say, they all bounce really, really well off one another. Especially Cloud and Barrett, Cloud and the girls. You put anyone in the group and they're great. Yuffie even has good moments too, being the overconfident, cocky teenage girl ninja needing to prove herself, and she even gets her own side story arc. Vincent, however, does not. But I've got to say, almost all the characters in this game are just awesome. There isn't a least favorite for me in this group. I like using them all. They all have special abilities too. And the dialogue just really works for them all. I honestly, I can't argue with these guys. They're great. Not one character seems useless. They all play a big part in the story, minus the bonus characters. So, yeah, I really like 7's main cast. But let's compare 7's main cast to 8's main cast. Let's hit that. Now we have 8, which is got a good diverse form of characters. There's Squall, who is similar to Cloud in his own way, but he's more introverted and he's nowhere near as overconfident. But his chemistry works well with Cypher, but he only gets to be part of your group once, and I'll talk about Cypher in the next segment here. Anyhow, they all kind of don't work together in this. There are characters that get on each other's nerves really bad. Zell is overly hyperactive. Even though I have a soft spot for Zell, he's overly hyperactive and can be really stupid at times. Squall can be a big, brooding jerk of a guy, but you can't help but see a lot of yourself in him. Especially when I was a teenager, I seen a lot of myself in Squall, so I have a big soft spot for Squall. And I may dare say I like Squall just a touch more than Cloud. But that's a main character struggle. I'm going through the whole cast and how they have chemistry with one another. There is also Selphie, Irvin, and etc. all throughout Quistis and Riona. The love triangle in Final Fantasy VIII doesn't go through the partners in this round. It goes through the hero-villain dynamic, which I like a lot. And the characters, in their own kind of mixed up way, really pretty much work. I honestly enjoy them all together. They can be funny, but a lot of times they seem off. At least with Cloud's team, you could see friendships kind of forming with them, but with 8, it takes forever to get that friendship going. Instead of people getting respect for each other, it's more Squall's just getting really fucking annoyed with everyone. But I've got to say, his chemistry with Riona is beautiful. And honestly, easily one of the best parts of the game. And I would say it's just a great dynamic. I love Squall and Riona. They are possibly my favorite Final Fantasy couple. Even more so than Tidus and Yuna. And that's saying a lot for me because I love those two. These guys just have so much in common. Riona kind of brings out his softer side. It's the side where he shows that he genuinely cares for his friends, even though they annoy him at times. And honestly, I see a lot of myself within those personalities, and it's a great mix. All I'm going to say is I love the characters, and now let's go to the next segment, the villains. Let's see who does the villains better, 7 or 8. Well, 7 and 8's villains. Let's start out with 7's, obviously. We're going to go with, first off, I'll talk about the Turks. And, of course, the Turks aren't really villains. Though they start off as such, they're not really the main villains of the story. They more are used as plot devices or really big, rude interruptions. Rufus Shinra is a pretty cool, laid-back villain. I've got to say, I enjoy him a lot. And the Turks themselves all have genuine fun personality, but they do become decent guys later on. And in Advent Children, they kind of have a genuine tolerance for Team Avalanche now. Or Strife Delivery is whatever the fuck they go by. And I don't know, there's just a good bond between them. But the villain that steals the show in 7 is probably the one you're all waiting for me to talk about. That's right, Sephiroth. Of course, we cannot have a villain run without one of the most evil characters in Final Fantasy, or hell, in video game history. Sephiroth was such a well-done villain, and he just makes this game. How they utilize him in this game is brilliant. At first, he's only brought up in passing mention as the greatest soldier in the world, as one of the greatest warriors ever, and he was also Cloud's hero. And man, that just makes a whole lot of fun right here. Cloud's hero, one of the greatest soldiers ever, and in passing mention, Cloud finally sits down and talks about Sephiroth and how Sephiroth freaked out and destroyed everything. We are finally shown him. Beforehand, though, before we are shown Cloud's story, we're only given passing mention of Sephiroth himself. We don't know that much about him, and it's the build-up alone that makes him excellent. The first time that we are introduced to Wind of Sephiroth is actually in the Shinra building after everyone is kidnapped, and you see all the staff has been killed off, including the president of Shinra at the time. I've got to say, it's fucking excellent how they utilize him. And then when we're finally revealed, Sephiroth has a conversation with the cast in Cloud's old hometown. It is just destroying on how he gets into the character's head and tells him everything he thought was a complete and utter lie. And Sephiroth, of course, does the worst thing you could possibly think of in the entire history, killing one of the main cast, murdering them for good, wiping them off the face of the earth. And it's just amazing. In one of the most heartbreaking scenes in video game history, Aerith is killed by Sephiroth, and you could just feel the raw emotions, and Sephiroth gives no shits about it. Even at the bitter end when you're fighting him, he still proclaims his power, and it's never over at this point. All I've got to say is it's well fucking done. It's amazing. Let's see how Final Fantasy VIII's villains top it. Final Fantasy VIII's villains involves time travel with a sorceress named Ultimecia who tries to take over Adia's mind with her time-bending abilities, and there's also another sorceress there that we really don't know about named Sorceress Adele, and not much is given on her. Her backstory is tedious. I don't really have a lot to say about the villains of 8 in the highest regard. This is where 8 suffers, in the casting. And I've got to say, one decent villain kind of gets pushed to the side, and that's Cypher. Cypher and Squall have a good love triangle with the main character, Riona, and then it's just kind of, after Disc 1, or maybe Disc 2, it's completely and utterly done. The love triangle is over with. I mean, it's just, God. Anyhow, yeah, the villains here are what really hurts 8. But the theories are what kind of saves 8. Who is Ultimecia? Why is she trying to destroy Seed so badly? Well, one of the theories is that she's actually Riona, and she does things that kind of signify that she might actually be her. One of them looking at Squall and saying, "Shall we have this dance?" Her having the summon ability of the mighty GF, of Squall's GF, and calling it Griever. I mean, yeah, that is a really good theory. We could say that Riona lost Squall, I don't know why I want to call him Cloud, and that caused her to turn and hate Seed because the only man that she truly, fully loved is now dead. And she wants to destroy Seed from becoming infatuated with Seed and changing history so she never has to feel that pain. But unfortunately, that's a theory. That's not at all what is said in the game. And I love this theory, and I kind of play it with this mindset, but yeah. Ultimecia, you really don't see her until literally Disc 3 or 4 of the game. Instead, we're giving a bunch of throwaway villains and Cypher doing stupid shit and attacking schools. That's it. That's all we get. The villain has absolutely no depth to her. And honestly, I think she's got a cool design. I think she is got cool abilities and powers and how she's able to take over Sorceress from the past. But that's it. There is nothing fully detailed written about her like there would be for Sephiroth or Shinra for that matter. It's honestly kind of depressing. And I've got to say, yeah, this just hurts. And Final Fantasy VIII had a lot better story in my opinion, one that kind of has a slow burn. But when it comes to the villains, it fails, and it fails really hard. Ultimecia sucks. Now, if they had come up with this theory of maybe put it in the game that's really Riona in the future, that would be fucking fantastic, and that would give so much depth to Ultimecia, but unfortunately, it doesn't happen. We don't get that. And we're just with a villain that is, she's just evil. End of story. So let's move on as I rank the final characters. I went over 7 and 8's characters, the good guys, bad guys, and honestly, 7's characters are just much more vibrant in this case. I know a lot of people really love 8's characters and chemistry, and I love them too. I have a soft spot for almost all of them, except for maybe Irvin. He's kind of a moron. But other than that, I love these guys altogether, but 7 did the cast of characters just a little more. I may like Squall a little more than Cloud, but I've got to say the chemistry between the characters and then the chemistry between the villains of the two games 7 dominates in this aspect completely. 7 takes a full takeover of this, and they really knock it out of the park. You care about each one of the characters. And unfortunately, we lose one of the characters in one of the most heartbreaking scenes ever, and it tears you apart. So, throughout heroes and villains, I'm going to say 7 is the winner of this round. Let's move on to the next spot, to the gameplay of the games. Which game has the better gameplay? And honestly, this is kind of unfair, but yeah, let's move on to the gameplay aspect. I'm going to go ahead and just compare the gameplays easily together and make this as quick and painless as possible. I'll go ahead and start talking about 7's gameplay. The materia aspect is very easy to learn, very easy to use, and you can find ways to equip it to your character to make it their better elements and summons throughout the runs, making summons more of an option for your attacks than, say, a must-have for your attacks. Say if you want to use a summon to get out of a quick fight or whatever, that's definitely what you need. But having that summon or whatever in your materia lineup doesn't follow or mess up anything into your materia lineup at all. The magic is easy to use. If you run out, you just refill with more MP. And that's about it. Get ethers, elixirs, you name it, rest, and you're able to fill it up. It's very simple, very easy to use. The gameplay is slick and quick and way better than anything you could ever think of on the PS1. It's a very fast process gameplay. Let's go over to 8's gameplay. Dear God! Okay. The drawing junction. This is the biggest fault 8 has ever freaking done. The drawing thing. How fucking stupid is that? You draw, and unfortunately, you've got to take certain actions to be able to do it. So yeah, the drawing thing is complete and utter crap. Let's just say this. Say you want a certain number of magics. Well, you have to actually have, say, the summon, which is called a GF in this game, equipped to have a good basic ability of healing and using abilities, drawing. Everything runs to your GF. And it sucks. Oh god, it could get very tedious, very pretentious. Its drawing junction is complete garbage. There are ways around it. You can find places to draw from, but let's just say there are certain characters that you don't want to give a GF to, but these characters you're going to have to use, and they don't level up. And unfortunately, the more you level up, the harder the last villain is. The villain just increases by your level. 8 is one of the more tedious games I have ever sat down to play when it comes to the drawing junction. And I know there are ways you can get around it with the mini card things or the mini games or whatever, but it doesn't help at all. It just makes it more painful. The card game is a pain in the ass. I don't sit and play it. I don't want to sit and play it. Everyone has their own unique ability, but some of them really suck. Irvin's attacks are jokes. Selfies is useful. Zell's can be a huge fucking joke at times. And if you don't have these certain things equipped to the magic to your attacks, then everything you do is completely, utterly fucking useless. Every character has to have a GF, or that character is complete useless. So you will have a character in your bank that is going to get killed off automatically. Especially in the final battle, where you have to fight Ultimecia, and she just selects random characters. Your life will be fucking done with the second Ultimecia kills you. I mean, my god, it is a pain in the fucking ass. Now, if 8 got remade and had, say, 7 or 10's gameplay tactics, then it would be so much better. But good God almighty, it's an easy process here. The winner for the gameplay aspect goes to 7. 8 is fucking difficult and a pain in the ass, and it's too strategic. A lot of noobs who are trying to get into Final Fantasy that start with this game are going to be like, what the fuck is this shit? That was that. 8 was one of my first games, and that was my reaction. What the fuck is this shit? So 7's gameplay, which is so much more smoother, so much better, is obviously the clear freaking winner. Let's move on to my final thoughts. Now my final thoughts are just going to include the gameplay, the specifics. I've already went over this. 7 and 8 both have beautiful music, and some of the best music that I have ever heard in the history of game music. Now, I wouldn't say it's as good as, say, Chrono Trigger's music, which, is probably the best video game track of all time. But damn, it's close. It is very close, and I love the music in both of these games. But 7 seems to have much more, I don't know. The music seems to fit with the emotion a lot more. There are some real jammers. One Winged Angel is just awesome. But I can't discount 8's intro theme. Oh my god, I love that chorus at the beginning of the game. So, I'm going to say 7 does have great music. I'm not going to rank these or anything in any way. But as a game total, both games are fun. Both games have a good story and etc. in it. Both games have good characters in it. But the crowning achievement for the best game is obviously going to go to 7. I love 8 to pieces. In fact, it was my very first Final Fantasy game, and it got me into the realm of Final Fantasy. I love 8 to pieces, and I have a big soft spot for it in my heart. But 8 may have a great story, a slightly better story that lets you revolve around the characters and the setting, but 7's characters are so much more likable, and 7 has a much memorable villain. So the way I'm going to put this is 7 is the much better game in retrospect. I know a lot of people were probably expecting me to say 8 was better, but I have to go with it. The original 7 is a masterpiece, and that's all I'm going to say. It just really hit that. And it just hit me right in the right moments with the right type of characters, the right type of story dynamics, and a villain that is probably one of the most memorable villains in fucking history. Now, join me next round as I talk again about something anime later on. Anyhow, that's it. I'm pretty much done here on this one. Next round, I'm probably going to talk about Final Fantasy VII Advent Children and the impact it had with fans. And I'll also be talking about Crisis Core and some of the other Final Fantasy spin-offs. So join in next round as I talk about some of the other Final Fantasy spin-offs. But I will not talk about that shitty-ass remake. Anyhow, thank you all for watching. I hope you really enjoyed this one, and always remember, I'm listening.
Hello. It is I, George Newbern, as Sephiroth, to tell you all the best way to get into the Promised Land is to like and subscribe to Tim's YouTube channel for more awesome content. See you there. Or get on your knees and beg for forgiveness.